Okay, test, check. Okay, I am definitely going to need, yeah, I will roll, and if I can get an adapter, that would be wonderful. I am low on battery.
Okay.
Yeah, so, yeah.
I know someone's just run to the practical.
There might be one, okay.
How about the other end of the cable?
That,
Mickey Mouse plug.
yeah, I just need,
No.
no, it's not
What
that.
is it? Is it,
It's this.
oh, shite.
Yeah,
No, I don't have that.
yeah, Universal. I thought I had in my bag.
What is this laptop?
It is,
Table of play. Oh,
it's a,
round
it's
proprietary something. Okay.
yeah, and this doesn't have, it's got watch on there. Okay, so it coming up, all right, in that case we will roll from, and I will move my secret. Okay. All right, ready to roll? Okay. All right, first of all, introductions in order. Jeffrey Goff with Clearbuild Technologies. I think we might be hiring, which is kind of important because we do remote work. I only met my boss actually at YAFC after having worked since October for the company. So very much remote. He's in Virginia. I'm right now in Rīga. So one of the there we go, excellent. So one of the projects I'm working on right now, or that I was working on for a while, was dealing with the DXtreme. Dealing with the DXtreme JavaScript library. This is a handy-dandy library that does graphs, charts, a lot of spreadsheets, pivot tables, and a lot of other fun JavaScript tools. But for my part, I was worrying mostly about the so-called DXGrid. And naturally, since we're Perl here, a Perl shop, we do most of our work with Dancer, and also a lot of work with DBIx and DBIx class. So what I was tasked with was a simple way for the user, not necessarily a simple way for me, to bridge between the existing DXtreme library and the rest side of the application. That's all done in Perl. So this talk will be uploaded within the next few days at this address here, github.com, drfor, my nick, and then the DXtreme-talk. You'll have all of this and probably a small working application with the module, because there is a module that will be released to CPAN from all of this. So the DXtreme DataGrid looks pretty much like any other DataGrid on the market. You have two-way scrolling of a box. Here, this is DXtreme running and creating a column for me. So, rather a row of data. These entries here can be nested, or they can create different objects. For our case, we'll just use a simple two-dimensional data grid. You have one set of rows coming out as a JSON, return from your API, and the JavaScript takes that JSON return. It also takes that JSON and renders that back out into the data grid. It is dynamic and scrolling. You can do the usual infinite scrolling tricks. You can select bits. You can go backwards, upside down in the screen, and do all sorts of work. what I was focusing on is just the very simple stuff, the ability to create a row in a DXGrid, to be able to view data in a DXGrid. All these columns here are manipulable, so you can move them about, sort them by various means. So basically a lot of JSON is passed between you and the server. And also, of course, you can add information. You can have text, you can have note fields, you can have dates, booleans, all sorts of flags. And you can also, of course, at the very least, delete rows. Most of what I'll be talking about is a little easier to show the code and not so much in a slide format. So what I'll do at a certain point is cut over to just talking about the actual code that's going on in the back. Because because the way Reveal.js, my rendering toolkit works for slides, doesn't deal very well with code. So, from the 10,000 foot mark, if you will, this is the JavaScript that you need to create your own DXGrid. At least a portion of it. You use the usual $, pound form, usual $ name, where you place the labels, all sorts of configuration. You have here data fields, which are the fields inside the JSON that comes back to you. And you have labels for that data. You have different ways to merge the data. You have different types that you assign to the data, and that's all done using JSON configuration. One thing that makes this a little bit unusual, at least for me, was, and I hope this was just an implementation thing. The way the implementation works out is when someone else does all of the JSON and JavaScript and front-end work and has us just fill in the core REST application in the background. And what they choose to use here is a little bit different arrangement than I would prefer. So when you are trying to create your data structure on the back end, instead of having a nice nested data structure of, in this case, a truck with a given color and a working address, which has a separate JSON object inside, what they return is they return an address. There should be address brace street, as far as I'm concerned, for the ease of use of JSON. Unfortunately, what they say is address _ street, which, as you can imagine, complicates things a little bit on the back end. Because again, what I want to do here is be able to create a very nice, straightforward application that does all the stuff that we're doing here to post, which is REST speak for create, unpack all of the JSON from one value, unpack the color, unpack the address, unpack all the objects back to what they should be, undo the _ over there, undo all of that work, go through and insert into a new truck object somewhere the fields here, insert a nested truck address object, and this time unpack the address _ street into address street like so. Do all that work and get it to look good and be sure enough that a junior programmer can come along and bang out one of these in a few minutes. So So what I did, what I came up with here, was first of all, after many iterations, and I show you a few of those if you like, came through, started out with a lot of different ways to do this task, and eventually got down to the point where all you have to do on the Perl side is create this data structure, which tells all the backend how to map from DBIx all the way back out to JSON format and all the way back in. You declare that object, and if you want, you have Q transforms. And in the end, it looks like it's just another Dancer keyword. How many people here use Dancer right now? Dancer, Dancer 2? Okay, about half. Okay, so you're familiar with the keywords such as get, push, delete, get, post, cerebrum, all params. Well, what we're doing here is taking all of this, which you probably recognize at least some of this. A lot of this is basic CRUD. Create, read, update, delete. So here we're getting a list of the truck information. I don't understand quite why DXtreme does this, but what we do is we're just using the name here for /truck, and for some reason DXtreme uses lists, uses the /list URL to generate a list of truck information. So you're probably familiar with at least a portion of this. Again, we're using DBIx class, so you have a result set of truck data coming in. You search for that order by ID, return all of the lists. And now what you do to do all of the other work is you pass the data you have here through our map, all the list of addresses, pass it through one function, and now you get back a list of JSON data that you can just pass back directly back to DXtreme. So that's pretty decent. We've cut out a lot of the middlemen. The flattening routine here, basically all that does is undoes the map, undoes the object creation, because trucks have inside them, they have a color, they have a license plate number, they have, crane operators and whatnot, number of tires, and they also have address objects inside them. So what we do with this down here is to flatten the data structure that we get back using this map again. Flatten that data structure down to something that we can pass directly back to DXtreme. But that's still a lot of code to do what should be one simple thing. And if I were sitting down there at my screen pounding out these, a post request, take in the post request, do the insertion, deletion, write the JSON out, do the same thing for the update, do the same thing for this, I would want that a little bit more compact. So what I did was scratch my head for a few days and started poking around on CPAN and found the REST display and managed to get down a little bit more, a little bit closer. This is what a proper REST display looks like in Dancer 2. Dancer uses the keyword resource, and in our case, the root or object is going to be the address. And they do something a little bit different than normal REST in that they use the get, put, push, delete keywords. So it's a little different. And this would have been okay. It would have been fine. But I don't much like the resource keyword there because that is really overused in my opinion. Resource is really generic. It doesn't tell you a lot about what the application does. And there's still a lot going on here. I mean, if we do a little bit more work here, we can go in and we can get rid of the JSON packing because it's a DXtreme object. It takes JSON. So we'll always do that on all the calls. Also, because they're all DXtreme objects, they also take the same parameters in JSON, so we know all of those will return an ID and value. So we can get rid of all of that. And in the end, what we can do is we get this for the entire truck API that drives the entire front end, that handles the create, that handles the delete, that handles the update, that handles, that handles editing, handles viewing. We get all down to this. This probably will be moved out eventually into a configuration file somewhere or something more static eventually. But all you have to do from your end is use the DXtreme plugin. That gives you the DXtreme keyword down here. You can define it to work against in ResultSet in DBIx. So we give them ResultSet as a truck. We declare the map, which has a lot more configuration options than just a straightforward one-to-one relation. With this, you can do things like address translation, you can do date translation, you can do aliasing, you can do naming, and we'll go into a little bit more of that as we go on. I forgot to ask at the start if you had questions. By all means, if you got them while you're thinking about them, let's go ahead and shout out. This portion, I'm going to be moving more into actual looking at code and looking at what this all looks like in the wild. So this will be a little bit less slide heavy and more, in this case, GitHub heavy, or rather GitLab heavy, I should say. So let's move this over here. And hopefully, I have never gotten used to that. I don't know why. Okay. Anyway, this is a live version of a DataGrid over on the DXtreme website. We won't go into all the controls, etc., but it supports editing, it supports live updates, it will support Ajax. So configuration gets a little bit complex. What we do on our side is this bit. And what you would do as, well, better to show, yeah. What you end up doing for your side is you create the mapping from DBIx over to JSON. We handle all of the underscore translation, all of the flattening. All you do is tell us what columns you have in your database, where they want to go to. This is a sort of an old version, but you have this, and we support ways to do column aliasing. So you have state abbreviation alias to state. So you have a separate state table. You can tell it to look up the abbreviation and reference that back to the state column. We handle that for you, do all the lookup. This code down here is a little bit old. But let's see here. Try to find. Yeah, this is a little bit more complex and real world part of the mapping that you can use. This is for entry in a truck database. Here, a truck has a single office. A truck here has a single office. And by the way, if you don't use the keyword ID for your ID-ish fields, that's fine. Just use this over here, because I use the dash here not just because I happen to like the TK defaults. I don't. In this case, it's because anything with a preceding dash is not a legal SQL keyword. so it will never get confused with actual data like that. So you create the map here. You have, a truck. You have a single truck row. So you have an ID, you have a name, and an office like in DBIx that links down to a secondary office row. And inside there you have the ResultSet name in case it's different than DBIx. And you still specify the name, and you specify an alias here as well. So you already have an office name. You specify the name there as well. And inside the office, we have a bunch of addresses. So you map from office address line 1 all the way back to line 1 in your data. And the code is smart enough to go through and use this again for both creating, reading, updating. You do nothing. Let's see here, some other things. You can also abbreviate table names, like so. And in the end, all the way down here, you can create your own API on top of what you have, and then use the DXtreme keyword down here to do the work. I will be honest and let you know that we switched times in this whole thing. It was supposed to be 20 minutes, but what I think we can do here is we can take a little closer look at what is going on in the code. So if you want to create one of these for yourself, it's not all that hard. This right now is private over on GitLab. But again, this will be all made public. The important things here for when you're creating your own plugins, obviously the Advanced 2 plugin that lets you create and expose your own keywords, in our case, DXtreme. We also do all of our own JSON translations, so we pull in JSON applications. We do a little bit of work to, let's see here. The fun part here starts with the actual DXtreme keyword. This little attribute right here is Perl right around 520. It's been around a while. But in our case, what this says is that whenever you encounter the keyword DXtreme inside an answer, that calls back to us. And in our case, we have a few quick checks here. We need to know what route you're actually working with. So we need to know that you're actually working with a DBIx result. And we also need to know that we have a map to work with. So basically, over there. So then, next step, of course, is to ignore the swath of comments here. This is all mostly debugging here. So what we're doing here is, aside from just specifying the result set and specifying keywords, you can also specify your own overrides. If you specify your own create handling, then we will do most of the work for you. We'll handle JSON marshalling. We'll handle all the DBIx work, and all you have to do is that little bit of work that may say, add one day to today, or that may replace a calendar. That may replace a calendar with a string. Do some very little bit of work here, and what we're doing here is all of the fancy back-end work that you would ordinarily need to do yourself. Ordinarily, you would need to go in and unpack all the values from JSON. So we unpack the values from the JSON application here for you. We go down here. go through our configuration, see what columns need to be created for each of those, and for each of the individual data sets inside. So before we had the, let's see here. Up here we have the truck, and inside that we have the office. So we let you create the truck and then create the office associated with that truck. The way it's written is per corporate policy when we want to create new columns for each record. So if you have, say, 2 trucks at the same office, it will, by policy, create a second office record, which I don't happen to like, but that's the way we have things currently set up. Back to all this. We do a couple of checks in here for the ID keywords. Look around for all of the special cases and some cases there. And again, what I'm doing here is just creating these as subroutines inside an anonymous subroutine inside the main application, so that when we go down here to the end, or let's get through all, read, create, update, delete, all of those, then what we end up doing is, as part of the DXtreme keyword, the DXtreme keyword actually returns a route with all of the create and read and update and delete methods all populated for you. So you don't have to write any of your own roots. All you do is write the DXtreme name, and we'll handle all of the DXtreme paperwork that's involved with creating the roots and creating keys and creating values. That took a little bit of work to actually do research to find out what DXtreme was doing and what it wants to return, because mainly because it's a JSON application, and live JSON AJAX will ask for records at any time and for any range, and we'll ask for them in a bunch of different ways. And what we've done with this is encapsulate as many of those as we can find, and I'm sure we'll find many more as we go along. Down at the very end is the final business end of that, where we actually go to the original advanced replication and add in our roots at the very end. So for the regex, we just take the truck or address or office value, and then we have 2 code blocks that we can run. We can either run a default action, like a default delete action, or we can say run the user-defined action that you create for updating fields, because we have forgotten the need for customization. Try and get something to compare with these two with. Right. By contrast to all of the create and read that we have above, if you want to create your own actions to handle everything that DXtreme wants, what you can do is call this, and what we'll do is we will take in the JSON, unpack the values, get the object that you want to create. We give you a fresh JSON, give you a fresh DBIx object, and all the parameters that you need, and you return that to us, and we'll unpack that back into JSON and send that back out to DXtreme for you live. The same thing happens with the usual read, update, delete. All of that is all done for you right there. I don't mean to sound like an infomercial, and I realize it's a little bit sound like that, but there's a bit of work going on in the background, and most of what I want to focus on, I guess, is how simple it is to do your own thing like this. So if you are out there working with a jQuery object, if you are out there working with anything that involves Angular or Angular React, you can use the same techniques. Question. And they're not all, and thankfully for us, they're not all that hard to learn. The key thing that you want to do when you decide that you want to use a plugin, so you create your own package and pull in the new Dancer public keyword. Later on, you create your own plugin keyword, whatever that may be. You say an Angular, sub-Angular :plugin, sub-React Vue :plugin, like so. And it takes the same parameters that you get from the straight root creation. So from there, you get the Dancer object, obviously, to work with, the root that is passed in, whether it's a regex, whether it's a string, whether it's a function, whether it's a list of references to work with. And in our case, we pass in a separate configuration package parameters that you can stuff in things yourself. Here we use that for the ResultSet that you're working with and the map. So you can do the same thing if you've got two worlds you need to bridge, if you will. My style here tends more towards anomalous subroutines and keeping scope clean, because anything here inside the anything inside Dancer scope is going to be exported to is going to be either export back to your object as a separate entity or as a keyword. So I like to keep things fully clean. So you might want to consider more using subroutines like this and just creating an anomalous subroutine that returns things. Got a question there? Or? Oh, okay, cool. Let's see here. Some other things going on. A couple of things that I will point out as well over in the use of this. One thing that I wanted to keep separate was I wanted to keep separate the SQL that you pass in and the non-SQL outside keywords. You may remember that I mentioned about not wanting to, illegal keywords in this. So what I do is make sure that I just came up with this idea after remembering about the old school way that TK and Tickle interfaces work. So I just decided. So I did a little bit of looking up, and turns out that luckily leading dashes for keywords or value names or values or columns are all illegal. So this way we don't mix in our SQL columns with anything else there. So that's a handy technique to keep things out of band. So you have things like the dash result set, which really you don't need to use because we can figure that out already from the keyword address. But if you have something else there, or you have, say, a view that you want to pull in instead of the original field, that's how you do that. And again, this is just despite the fairly heavy nesting, this really is simply a one-to-one relationship between how a DBIx class object looks and how the JSON class looks. So if we were to go down and iterate through each field, we go down and iterate and pull out the ID, which will be the ID truck.id, name, which will be truck.name, office, which at this point is a separate reference, and that goes into a separate object. So then you have truck arrow office.id, truck arrow office state.name truck arrow office.address, which jumps down into the address block down here. And we do some more work here because I didn't have a hand in designing these tables originally, so I need to work around a few problems. So we had already a state table we had a state there, which in the SQL is a state table. So you have state.name, state.abbreviation. So what I had to do was I got down to the point of looking at that and realized, oh, right, you have address.state instead of address.state.name. This could be interesting. So I go through and realize, oh, wait, so I think about this. Okay, I'm doing SQL here. So what's the concept from SQL that I can use that people will understand? That being, of course, the idea of a table alias. So we have down here, we have a from and an abbreviation with dash as you would say if you have say select star from truck, comma select star from truck, where truck ID in truck done, where truck ID in select star from truck, which you can't do in SQL because you have two names. So you say select star from truck at select star from truck as a comma parent select star from truck, and then use the alias a throughout the rest of the application. Most of this hopefully will be easy to use when it's released. It's coming up here, coming up here in a few weeks once I get a few of the last bugs ironed out, and I will hope that you folks can at least learn something from this. Any questions out there, or? I love to show you a live version of this, but unfortunately, it's all right now under NDA. So I can't really show you anything. Well, what I can show you here is over here with this screen, and give you an idea of the interaction that we support. So if you will, imagine that this backend is us going around and playing with the system. We provide an enum field that returns a list of drop-down items like so. And I'm hearing applause over there, so they're probably ending up a little bit short on their side. What's it? 5 minutes? Okay. All right. Well, this is the sort of thing that we support, which luckily you don't have to. It does take a lot of work, but trying to figure it's not well it's documented, but it's not quite up to date, and I ended up having to use Wireshark at a few points to figure out some problems that I encountered on the way in and back out. So I'm hoping to save you folks some time if you ever encounter this, and hopefully, again, switch. Come on. Oh, right. And again, when you encounter React or Angular or any of those other applications, maybe you look at this and say, I know, let's try to build a keyword for that. I know this was something of a revelation to me because I was using Dancer for 3 or 4 years before realizing, oh, right, I could do that myself. And I just never had a reason to do that until now. I was going around happily, just writing out root after root, writing out a get root and then get put patch delete, etc. Get push post patch delete, running all those out, and realizing, okay, these are starting to blur together in my mind. This get looks a lot like that. Get looks a lot like that. Get, wait a minute, maybe I'm looking at this the wrong way. Maybe I can go in and create my own keyword instead of having my own get function, instead of having just what a dancer gives me naturally, which is great. But when you're doing this sort of thing over and over and over again, it's handy to be able to, instead of typing all the text out for all the updating and all the reading and all the reading, and it also does things under transactions, and it will also handle data errors and things for you as well. So it handles a lot of that, and if you can get, and hopefully if you can push that down to just these, 3 or 4 lines here. I hope that this is an inspiration, and if you have no further questions, I will call this. We have a question.
So did you look at different front-end implementations for this? Because I know that in our product we use a commercial library that does something similar.
Okay.
I think it's written in very called data tables.
Okay. Sounds very familiar. Okay. Yeah. The question for those of you watching live, or more suggestion, I guess, is are you asking if we have looked at data tables?
How did you pick what to use for the front end?
Okay. The question would be more the question is how to pick from the different libraries what front end to use for what. How we pick that. This was mostly given to me, I'll be honest. I have some input, and my preference there will be more along the lines of Angular or React. But how I would look, but if I were the one making a decision between, say, DataGrid and DXtreme, one thing I would look for is a clean REST, is an actual REST API. DXtreme isn't quite there. So that's one thing to look for there. In terms of interaction, these days I would also make sure that it does all the interaction between the front end using JSON and only JSON. That's another big thing that I will look for in terms of interaction. And beyond that, I can't say much about the stability of things like, say, Node PM usage, but I mean, there's obviously looking at the pedigree of the modules. DXtreme, again, I wasn't around when this choice was made, and in doing so, I think that the module, module ended up better because of it, because I had to go in and make a lot of compromises when the front end and the back end data didn't work out. So I think that it made things tougher. We've got about a minute left, so do we have any more questions? Okay, I think we're good. Thank you.